And Sean, closing things out, let's talk about, this was, I'll say, the trickiest podcast to kind of decide what order we were going to do the topics in, because part of me is like, I want to get the draft stuff out as soon as possible. But then there's a part of me that's like, knowing our luck, we're talking about Quentin Grimes here, that we will record this, it will go on podcast services, but before it can go up on YouTube, he'll announce where he's going. That will make everything moot. So I hope that doesn't happen. I hope he doesn't decide until after this gets a little bit of breathability. Did he just make his decision?
No, I want to cut in real quick.
Okay.
I'm looking at, because I finally got access to the 2018 NBA mock drafts, and this is why I'm glad you saved stuff like this, because
I want to look back on it.
In the sidebar of when I was doing my second round pick, second round stuff, I had the guys that I thought could go. One of them's Goga Bachaste. Wow. And now seeing the growth of, he didn't even make it into my second round. With 2 rounds last year, now he's already in the he's already in my first round, and I'm absolutely in love with him. So it's crazy how guys can change and how your opinions can change so quickly.
Oh shoot, I'm looking at yours. Now I'm looking at mine to see if there was anyone.
Yeah, Josh Okogie at 38, but I was absolutely in love with him. That was a mistake.
I'm trying to see here. Is there anyone that is in this year's draft that I had? Tony Carr technically came.
You have Goga at 59.
Oh, I do. I did have Goga. Yeah, that's something where usually at that point, though, we knew from the college players who was coming and who was going back. But with Quentin Grimes, he is a player that came out, did the whole draft process thing, then said, screw it, I am going to go back to college. Also, I did not mention this at the beginning. You did notice earlier on, beginning of the podcast, Sean said Dave's not here. That's why he's able to take up the entire right side of the table. Dave not here because he had to help the in-laws reinstall Windows, I think he said.
Fuck you, Dave. I don't know. Who
which
cares?
was basically...
Left us be.
Had to do that, and it was not going perfectly. But he did want me to say, and I will say this before we talk about the Quentin Grimes, that, and I'm just going to read his tweet. In spirit...
It's a text, and he said...
Yeah. In spirit, can y'all say on my behalf, I'm hoping against all logic that Grimes actually has a great year this upcoming season and goes late lotto or something totally unexpected. And the news with Quentin Grimes is that he was coming out into the draft, came back to college. Then it was Doxson also was coming into Kansas. So Quentin Grimes is like, Audi 5000, I'm going to get out of here as soon as possible. And he's visited 2 schools, either Houston, Texas A&M. He's going to choose between one or the other. I will ask you, Sean, when it comes to Quentin Grimes, do you personally see a preference over one or the other for his success when it comes to getting a higher draft pick next year?
I think the biggest thing is just look at the precursor of if your goal is to get drafted, look at which team has produced more players. And I think recently that would be Houston, and you also have to look at the head coaches, and having Kelvin Sampson on the bench of Houston Cougars is a huge part, and we've seen his success in the game of basketball and what he's been able to do, both at his time in Indiana, his time in Houston as well. Kelvin's a very he's a coach with a lot of accolades, is what I should say. And I think going from Bill Self to Kelvin Sampson would be a much easier transition because you're going to a guy, both guys with great basketball minds. So I think that if I was making that choice and basically selling it off of, basketball and their program in general and just trying to get drafted, I think choosing the Houston Cougars would be the smartest move for Quentin Grimes' career.
And that's with me. I was saying the same. I was thinking the same thing because I know that not this year's draft, but last year's draft, we had Robert Williams was the big one from Texas A&M. But I look at it, and the one player I kind of look at with what his draft stock is what it is, but he's a different player than Quentin Grimes, is Corey Davis Jr., one of the guys who kind of led that Houston team. This was a Houston team that I thought had the potential to make the Final Four in the region that they were in with Kentucky and Auburn and North Carolina. For me, I was telling you before we started recording this, when I saw the two teams, like how much one-sided it would be in my mind, is that when I saw Texas A&M was a choice, I audibly said to my computer, why? Why would you why would you want to pick Texas A&M? Because this is a team that last year in the SEC, and I know you could come in and start thinking about, well, maybe I'm the guy to kind of change things, and like they didn't have a player like me, so I can go ahead and get more playtime and basically shine. But why would you want to go to a team that, I would say, has if I'm comparing both head coaches, does not have the slider for winning in that. Houston wins that category. But also in the SEC, you're a 14-win team, and you were 11th in the SEC, and you're not going to be seen on that tournament stage when really all the eyeballs are on you in March.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, too, is just the fact that you'll get more experience at Houston. Going through the, what conference is it again?
They are CUSA?
Yeah,
right?
CUSA.
No, American. They're the American.
They are?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Well, still, I mean, you have now Mick Cronin leaving Cincinnati, and that was one of the big opponents that they had in that conference. So that's going to easily make their chances a little bit easier. UConn's been kind of in the shitter recently, but they're making strides, especially since getting rid of Kevin Alley. I know there's a huge kerfuffle with that whole thing. But since they made the move of getting rid of Kevin Alley and bringing in Dan Hurley, I think the strides are being made towards them, but I don't think anything's really locked down for them. And outside of that, if we're looking at the teams that are in that conference, I don't think anything stands out outside of Houston basketball. Houston basketball has been in the tournament very consistently for the past couple of years. Again, Kelvin Sampson's probably one of the best coaches in that conference, if not the best. Some people might make an argument for Dan Hurley and what he did with Rhode Island. But I think Kelvin Sampson, with his long career of being in Indiana and Houston, I'd probably give it to him. So I think that Quentin Grimes would be making the best decision to go to Houston because he gets those extra reps in going into the tournament. And if he has a big tournament, we know what that can do for players. And also, you look at what P.J. Washington was able to do in Kentucky. And I know Kentucky and Houston, different programs, although they have like the same fucking logo. Just one's a UH and one's a UK, and one's red and one's blue. But we saw that P.J. Washington was a former five-star recruit. He didn't have that great of a year in Kentucky. And then he came back, worked his ass off, and is now a top 15 player in the NBA draft. And Quentin Grimes, I think, the talent's still there. It's just knowing that he needs to put in that work and being in a system that's going to be beneficial to him. And hopefully he can find that in either of the schools. And I think the biggest thing it would come down to is, how good of a team is Houston, and are they going to be too good where there's a ton of pressure, and if he doesn't perform well, will he be taken out of the lineup? Or Texas A&M, you can make some of those mistakes and still be, the guy on the team. Because Quentin Grimes, if he goes to Texas A&M, he's going to be the guy. Where at Houston, with their success, we know that Kelvin Sampson can recruit. He might go with some of the guys that he recruited, per se, than the guy that he swayed to get in Quentin Grimes.
And one of the questions that's just circling my head that I'll ask you, but I'm going to give my take before yours is, so the question is, should people look at this and say, because P.J. Washington coming back stayed with the same team. Whereas Grimes is saying, hey, I'm getting out of here.
Yep.
I'm going somewhere else. Should people look on that basically in a negative light? And the thing that I think of is I kind of lean towards no, because if your main goal is, hey, I want to raise my draft stock. Basically at Kansas, what I saw this past year was with Doxson coming back, basically, him and Grimes are going to kind of butt heads with how their play styles are so similar. And last year we saw that Doxson won out when it came to Bill Self. That it would be Doxson at 1, Grimes at 2. But then also I know that like Dietrich Lawson is in the draft. LeGerald Vick is in the draft. But they've got guys like Azubuike coming back next year. And I wonder D'Souza as well. I wonder if there's just too many cooks in the kitchen when it comes to Kansas, that this could be the best option PJ Washington style for Quentin Grimes, to where it's basically like, hey, especially like I'm talking Houston because that's where I think he should go. Like their main guy in Corey Davis is in the NBA draft. So like when I look at that, hey, I can come in, I can kind of have room to breathe, because Kansas to me, it's kind of like a, how do I put this? It's kind of like the Nasir Little situation without having the microscope of the Nasir Little situation of it wasn't necessarily Grimes battling with coaching about how he was being used. It's just a kind of system of like when you go to a Kansas, when you go to a North Carolina, you're going to have other great players coming with you. And it's more about, hey, the team success fitting a role, whether if that's not a big role and you're only playing 25 some minutes a game and only averaging 8 a game, you've got to fit that role rather than, hey, going to a Houston where, hey, I could have a bigger role because there's not as many great players, more of those 4-star players here at the smaller school.
And I think, too, with Kansas, obviously this streak ended, but there's so much pressure for them to be such a great school.
Yeah.
And not saying that Houston hasn't had success recently and that their team doesn't, that their school doesn't support them, because I mean they have a great fan base and they have a great pride in their Houston team. It's different than Kansas though.
It is, and
I think Kansas, if we look at it, their goal is not to make you the best NBA prospect.
It's to win a national championship.
It's to win a national championship. And not saying that Houston doesn't have the same goal or that Houston's better at producing NBA products, because if we're looking at who they got right now, clearly Kansas is winning that, especially just based on the fact that Joel Embiid's in the NBA right now. But Embiid wasn't made in Kansas. And I think that's the biggest thing is with UNC and with Kentucky and with Duke in some ways, and with Kansas, their goals are to win national championships and make you the best college basketball player. Where I think Quentin Grimes needs to kind of step away from that and just make sure that he's the best version of Quentin Grimes. Which, while Houston, their goal is still to win games, doesn't mean that Quentin Grimes is going to be put in this system and this culture that's been cultivated for 20 years. Kelvin Sampson wants to win games, and I think the way that he does it is more player friendly, where he's going to allow you to do what you do, and he's going to allow you to be who you are as long as you're winning games and helping the team. So I think that whether that be Texas A&M too, because I think Texas A&M will allow that freedom as well. Whether it be either of those teams, I think the decision for Quentin Grimes to leave is probably a smart one.
And the thing I'm looking up is, the funny thing is that if you look at, and this isn't going to affect this year's basketball season, but if you look at the 2020 basketball commits, the Houston Cougars are the second-ranked class right now in the country, because they've got 2 4-star recruits in Tremon Mack and Jamal Sheed. But the reason why I brought that up is so that I could look at 2019, because 2019, the one coming in this year, they weren't even in the top 50. They were 59th overall in recruiting, and they have a trio of 3-star recruits coming in, whereas Kansas for 2019 and this year, top 15 class, they were at 15. They've got, I'm going to screw up these names, but Tristan Inaruna, who's a 4-star recruit, Christian Braun, who's a 3-star, and then Isaac McBride, who's a 3-star, but also like a transfer in Isaac Moss, transferring from Iowa.
Well, and they were supposed to get R.J. Hampton, too.
4. They were supposed to, but he is now going overseas to play in Australia.
New Zealand.
That's the same league as what I was thinking, Australia and New Zealand, because they're in the NBL, I think Dave and I looked up this weekend. I just feel like for Quentin Grimes,
I'm glad we did a topic, but Dave still had to look it up.
What?
We did a topic on R.J. Hampton, but he still had to look up where he played.
Yeah, because I was like, he's like, oh, I can't remember what the actual name of the league was. But for me, I feel like the goal for Quentin Grimes is to just show up. Like, I want to see that. Like, I don't know if there's any, like, this is what points per game he has to be. I just want him to show us that last year was a fluke. Because if you look at our way too early, if you look at our first big board, I was really high on Quentin Grimes. Like, I thought he was going to be the guy to lead the Kansas Jayhawks this past year, and it just didn't work out that way. I want to see that from Quentin Grimes, and I think the way that he does that is, for me, is to become a member of the Houston Cougars, because what I feel like will happen is if he chooses Texas A&M, he might be able to play well, but he's not gonna win the SEC. He's not gonna win the SEC tournament, and there's a higher chance that he won't make the tournament. And then because the eyes aren't on him, I think
all that stuff's secondary, though. I think that stuff's secondary. I think the biggest thing for him is it's not about team success and how far they go and making the tournament. Making that stuff is important to his draft stock. But what's going to be more important to his draft stock is just being a better player. I mean, you look at what he did last year. He had 2 assists to 1.9 turnovers, so he's pretty much a 1-to-1 ratio there. He did shoot 34% from 3, which is okay, right? But you look at his free throw percentage, 60%. We obviously know that's an indicator for how good of a shooter you'll be in the NBA, and that's not high enough. It's simply not. If you're at 70, then that's kind of like, okay, he might be good. If you're at 80, that's a pretty good signifier that you will be good. But when you see these numbers, 38% from the field, 34% from 3, 60% from the line, not that great of a distributor. Again, 2 assists to 2 turnovers pretty much. He wasn't really that great defensively, and he was playing 27 minutes. Like, he wasn't good out there. And I think that's the biggest thing that he needs to just improve on is just go out and play. You're the 8th recruit in not a great class, obviously, as we can say. This is one of the worst. This is one of the worst classes that we've had, draft classes. But you're above guys that just looking at Keldon Johnson. You're above Darius Garland. You're above my favorite player in the world, Naz Reid. You're above Kobe White. You're above Kevin Porter. And some of these guys are going top 10. Kobe White's projected to go top 10. Obviously, Darius Garland projected to go top 5. You need to be able to prove why you were up there. And that's the biggest thing that I think Quentin Grimes needs to do is just prove that he was just in a bad spot last year. Well, and that doesn't mean team success. It just means that Quentin Grimes can go out there and play and shoot effectively and be a good distributor and be a guy that can score at any single point in the game, at any single level. He needs to be a guy that can go out and be Quentin Grimes and show the max potential that we thought he had in high school. I feel like if he goes to Texas A&M, he's going to kind of be overshadowed to where I feel like, let's say he goes to Texas A&M, when it comes to, and I'm going to use this draft class as a basis, the ceiling for him is going to be Jackson Hayes, because Jackson Hayes is a guy who lottery prospect, top 10 in some mocks. He did make the tournament, but like when I look at this year's first round of guys, and I'm using Tankathon as the example of first round guys not in the tournament, Darius Garland due to injury, or he was injured, but Vanderbilt didn't make it because he was injured. Jackson Hayes, Texas didn't make it. I'm going to say Ball because he didn't play in the tournament because he was injured this year. Let's see. Virginia Tech made it. Kevin Porter Jr. was not in the tournament. You've got then Matisse Thybulle, and then what? Ty Jerome was in there. So what, 3, maybe 4 guys, and the international guys are kind of left out of it because, of course, they're not making the tournament. But I feel like his best route to being drafted is Houston, not because he will get more of an opportunity to shine, but by being on a better team and a tournament-worthy team that he won't be forgotten in March, and that'll just help him be a solidified first round. But being forgotten in March, it doesn't matter when it comes to the NBA draft because you just got to be able to put yourself on the map in general, and that's all done just through play. Some guys make legacies in March, like Steph Curry's and like Jimmer Fredette's and like Adam Morrison's, but that all doesn't matter. The biggest thing is just going out and being that player. Because, I mean, we can look at Jarrett Culver. Jarrett Culver had a bad March, and he's still going top 5. So, and this is going to be a completely different draft class. This is a much better draft class next year. So he's just going to be able to be better. Again, a good March will not hurt him, but being in March is not a signifier that he will go. It's not the difference maker between whether he goes top 15 or top 10. It would just be an added bonus, because if he goes out and plays the same way that he did before, it's not really going to change it that much. If he goes and plays well at Texas A&M or whatever, and then they make the tournament, and then he turns out to be, he plays great, then that might boost it. But again, him playing in March is not the exact signifier on whether he's going to be a good NBA pro, or at least a highly ranked prospect going into next year's draft class.
And with the Jarrett Culver thing, I'll say he didn't have a bad March. He had a bad last 2 games. He had a bad Final Four.
Yeah, and then that didn't kill him.
But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you guys think. Where should Quentin Grimes go? And I will kind of preface it with this. If he's already made a decision by the time this video comes out, what do you think of the decision? Let us know. We'll continue that down in the comment section if he makes a decision beforehand, because obviously we're sitting here in the past.
Who's your guess?
I'm going to say Houston.
All right, I'm going to say Santa Clara.
Santa Clara.
Santa Clara.
What, are they the Ranchero? No, they're not the
I don't know.
I know
they're the Mustangs, I think.
No, you're right. I'm thinking of Santa Barbara, or the Rancheros, I want to say, because their symbol is like a little black hat. And I think their colors are blue, black, and yellow. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you guys think down below. Santa Clara, Texas A&M, Houston. What do you guys think? Also, make sure to check us out on Patreon. Patreon.com/MostValued Podcast. That's how you help support us. Make sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Every 5-star review means the world to us, and it helps us get into the ears of more people. Want to thank Sean for joining me this week. Hopefully Dave's back next week. He doesn't.
Oh, why? Because I was horrible?
No, I'm thanking you for being here.
Yeah, but you just said hopefully Dave's back.
I mean, don't you?
Why? Why do you hope Dave's back?
Because
am I not good enough for you, Ricky?
I love doing podcasts with both of you together.
Great.
Thank Sean for being here.
Whatever,
it's a great podcast. Dave, he's hopefully not helping the in-laws next week with installing Windows, and is here for the podcast. We miss you, Dave.
It's just a ploy. He's installing Windows.
And as always, have a good day, everybody.